So I host a show every morning called Java with Jeff. Originally, it was called My Morning Mindset, and one of the usual suspects, one of the audience members, renamed it Java with Jeff, and the title stuck. So that was over 3 years ago. So it's Java with Jeff, and I talk every morning about the mindsets that are necessary for growth. And that's what we talked about this morning. Was this quote from Epictetus that's in that Ryan Holiday uses in the Daily Stoic. And it's really, he talks about, well, both Epictetus and Ryan Holiday in the narrative after the quote, they talk about, I'll be happy when I lose this weight. I'll be happy when I make this money. I'll be happy when, whatever, right? It's this conditional happiness. And they relate yearning for this ideal future as being a thief of happiness. And so I started to think about that, and it comes out in the text in the Daily Stoic. But as I was thinking about that, I think it's as much about being present as anything else, right? If we're continually yearning, if we're continually looking for some imagined ideal, then it keeps us from being present now. I was a little bit more gentle about this in Java with Jeff this morning, but one of the things that came to my mind is, right, if we want to go back to a past time, if we say make America great again, no matter what your political leanings are, it's so easy to poke holes in that idea. Of course, everybody wants America. Every American wants America to be great. But what does that mean? Make America great again? Let's poke some holes in it. What time are you going back to? You're not being intellectually honest if that's what you're saying, because you're saying we're going to go back to some time. I don't even know when. The 50s, the 60s, the 80s, whatever you want. And what you're doing is you're romanticizing it, and you're talking about it as if it was some perfect time, and it wasn't. And you know that. And you're filling up your space. You're filling up your mind. You're filling up your emotions. You're filling up your time. Maybe if you're acting on this somehow with this pursuit of what was, because of some yearning about making it what will be. And so I think, politics aside and everything else, I think this idea of yearning, this idea of wanting to get back to, or maybe not even getting back to, let go of that for a minute and say this idea of this imagined ideal, it takes bandwidth away from you. But how do we square that with growth? Because growth is about, in a way, on the surface, we might think that growth is about the pursuit of an imagined ideal, this ideal situation. I do this with clients all the time, right? I use the Dan Sullivan question. Imagine yourself 5 years from today, and you've gotten to this point, you've completed all this work, and everything is great. Now, looking back from that point to today, what has to have happened between now and then to make that true? You can Google the Dan Sullivan question. You're going to find first his book on the topic, but if you click or you scroll for a second, you'll find the actual question. It's something like what I just said. So we use that as a tool. But the real key to sustainable growth is to say, okay, What does growth look like? What does it mean? What are my goals? What do I need to do in order to accomplish those goals? And then set about doing those things and letting go of expectations. And you might go, well, Jeff, how can you have goals, growth goals, and let go of those expectations at the same time? And the answer is that it's about the work. Hi, Scott. I did change hats. Yeah, that Braves hat does not get out in the weather. um, and I don't know. It might didn't really check the forecast. It's relatively warm. It's a cool breeze. It's like 60 degrees, 50 high 50s or something like that. But it looks and feels like it might rain. So this might get uncomfortable at some point. So definitely not a day for that Braves hat to be out. Um, that's my Hank Aaron Memorial Braves hat. Um, how can so back to that question? How can you have goals and let go of those expectations? And maybe that's the paradox of growth. Scott's heard me say this a lot of times, but growth starts with curiosity. What would it be like? It's like that imagined future, right? What would it be like if I did this, if I accomplished this, if I, all those things that show up in the post on the Daily Stoic. I'll be happy when I lose this weight. I'll be happy when I get this promotion, whatever those things are. Growth starts with curiosity around that imagined future state. And then the next step is the belief, right? That curiosity turns into a belief that by doing this or something like that, that you can grow and you can make yourself better. You can make your life, you can make your situation better. And then next comes the decision to take the action, the things that are necessary to move in that direction. And next comes the action. You have to take action in order to grow. You have to keep that action going until the next step, which is motion, those actions. You don't take them once, don't take them twice. You take those actions until it becomes part of your regular motion. And then eventually you keep that motion going and it generates momentum. It's the next step. And then that momentum drives change. And that change leads to growth, right? So those are the steps to growth, according to Jeff. So you have this desire, you have this expectation of growth. It's all melted now. Water's flowing. Well, there's the answer to why this was thawing and this was not. Somehow, right here, this water, like it pools right there. It's slow right there. And then over here, it really starts to run. Interesting. I don't know. I've never really studied that. Anyway, so how do you have these growth goals? You have this desire to grow, and at the same time let go of the expectations. And I think the answer is in the fact that we find that curiosity and we make this develop the belief and make the decision to take the action. But the action is the action. The action is the thing that we do over and over. And we essentially see where it goes. right? Yes, the hope is that if we keep taking this action, that we grow. What's the analogy? I was talking about it on Java with Jeff back when I was playing baseball as a pitcher. The hope is that I put in all these reps on the mound, the bullpen, practice my fastball or whatever pitch. The hope is I put in all these reps and I get better and better and better. Throw harder, more accuracy, better location, etc. Whatever the goals are. Right? I'm gonna grow in that way. I'm going to get better as a pitcher. I'm going to develop that pitch. And yes, I take those actions over and over, but I have to let go of the expectation of what the next rep is. It's all about this one. It's all about this pitch here and now in this moment. And I actually described it earlier. It's how does it feel to lift the front leg, to lean, to push off with the back leg, to lead with the front shoulder, to twist the torso, to bring the arm over like a whip. Where's the release point? What's the ball feel like rolling off the tips of your fingers? All of those things. When you're putting in those reps in the bullpen, you actually have to let go of all of the expectations and feel. That's the most important part about every one of those reps, I think, is how does it feel all the way through this rep? From right-handed, so from my right cleat as I'm pushing with my right leg to the fingertip, the tip of my middle finger on my right hand as the ball rolls off of it. How does every bit of that motion feel? It's about presence all the way through that. And then we see what the result is. Then we see what the speed gun says. Then we see what the location looks like. And then we see that. And then we do it over. And then we start it over, right? Am I happy with the way that felt all the way through? Right? There's that piece of it. And then I can measure the result. And then I can adjust based on that. But the Epictetus quote in the entry in the Daily Stoic for today says to let go of the yearning. Of course, when I'm going through the motions of that rep, when I'm feeling all of those things all the way through that rep of throwing this fastball in the bullpen, of course, I want it to be located better, or want it to be faster or whatever. But the question is this rep. Use the analogy before of your mobile device or your desktop or whatever it is. And we know that the fuller, how do you say that? We know that the more full our RAM is, our memory is on our devices, the more the performance of the device deteriorates. So, squirrel and cat. Hello, cat. Not going to stop and pet the cat today. It's not the same cat that's on the garage there. We know that the more full the device gets, the more the performance deteriorates. And I think that's part of Epictetus's point too, is the more we're yearning, the more it takes away. The more I'm looking for some ideal future, the more it takes away from my present. It takes away from my ability to be happy. the more we fill up, we use up our bandwidth with whataboutisms, with oh, wouldn't it be great if we could go back to this time? Wouldn't it be great if this, that, or the other? The more we fill, use up all of our resources, because that's what's happening with your device, right? And the bandwidth, the resources are being used up, the critical resources, the RAM, the memory that's necessary to bounce all that data, all those processes around is being used up. So in terms of growth, the more we use our resources on the past or the future, the less room we have to grow. And I've been talking about that a lot lately in terms of leadership. It's just come up with people that I'm working with, firms that I'm working with. I don't know why. There seem to be trends and conversations, trends and organizations, but it's come up so much lately where we see examples over and over that, you know, leadership requires clarity. And one of the reasons that it requires clarity is that clarity makes space. Right? If you are clear with your employees, if you have a clear decision-making process, if you have clear SOPs, if you have clear expectations, etc., then they're using up less space with wondering, with questioning. Clarity opens up that space where they can have ownership of themselves, of their work, empowered selves, not questioning themselves or processes. It opens up space because they have trust. They have trust that they know what's going on. They have trust that they know what the system and the process is, and they can execute on it, and they can do their best work within that framework. But they have space to grow in that. Think about that for a minute. That just came to mind, right? I've got this picture in my mind of structural grid or something like that. That's what we build in relationships, in business, and for ourselves. We build this structural framework with clarity. These are the expectations. These are the processes, etc. And that allows me to grow in that knowledge and clarity and understanding of all this. It allows me to grow within that framework and get better and grow within that. Does that make sense? Makes a lot of sense in my head. I have to go back to this recording so I remember that. But happiness doesn't ask us to know what's going to happen tomorrow. Happiness asks us to be present right now. Happiness asks us to let go of the yearning for something better. Think about that for a minute. You know, instant gratification versus delayed gratification. That's kind of, I think, that's kind of the part of the definition of it, right? Delayed gratification is not a focus on, you know, not being immersed in tomorrow in this yearning. I'm curious about these guys walking over here. Our ability to delay gratification and our ability to be satisfied may not be the right word, but to be focused on and be present in a world where we're scrolling, in a world where we're constantly bombarded by what ifs and, oh, did you see this? Did you hear this? People are saying this. Um, all of this. It could be, it should be, coulda, woulda, shoulda. Um, it can be really hard to be happy in a time like this when we're bombarded by all of these outside forces. And we have to be able to, I guess, in a way, disconnect from those things to make the space, to leave us the space for growth. I don't think that driver was super happy. So, it feels like a recurring theme that I feel like I've talked about this a lot over the last week or two. Um, how do we create the space that's necessary to grow? And that's physical space, but it's also emotional and mental space. So recognize the green awnings. I think made it to the coffee shop. Thanks for walking with me. See you tomorrow.